Start the live stream. Go right ahead.
And I'm going to move to open the meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And by unanimous vote, we're opening the meeting of the Harbor and Coastal Zone Management Commission for July 20, 2022. We should be available to folks at home on our on LMC TV, on our Zoom link, and I think still by the YouTube channel. And if you are watching at home, we're grateful that you're interested in public affairs in the village. We have one private applicant tonight. That's 120 Osborne. Can we call the applicant up?
Yes, I believe Jarrett's here. Jarrett, I'm going to promote you.
Good evening, everyone.
Jarrett, do you want me
Good
to
evening.
promote Eric and Anthony as well?
Yeah, definitely Anthony and Eric should be able to answer all of the questions you guys have in detail.
Good evening. I want to focus our discussion by saying that we have largely asked on this application about stormwater management and about documentation relating to stormwater management. I don't intend to surprise you with anything. I don't think. I think I'm going to ask you mostly about stormwater issues, and most of what I think we need to talk about is laid out in the Keller Sessions memo of July 14. If you've got new information to give us, or there's something you want to say, I'll let you open the floor. Otherwise, I'll sort of walk through the questions that I had. Okay, so in the Keller Sessions memo, there's a note about a seeming inconsistency at paragraph 18A between the depth of fill required to achieve a significant soil bed above the bedrock, and I was hoping you could clear that up for me.
Yeah, I can answer that one. I probably didn't, I'm Tony Passari, by the way. I probably didn't make it as clear as I should have, but we did some testing in front of the proposed location of where the house would be. In other words, where I ended up putting the storage piping. And in there's only about 18 to 24 inches of soil before you hit rock. We did 4 holes and they varied between 18 and 24 inches. If you go behind the house where the patio was proposed, we had gotten down about 4 feet. And one of the things we would be doing is placing some fill in that area so that there would be more than enough for the patio to drain into the ground through the stone under the patio. But in the front, I can't do Cultec recharges. I have to do pipe storage.
Okay, and for mostly for the benefit of anyone watching at home who may have followed this commission's work closely, we are often very concerned with net fill. That is a floodplain concern that doesn't arise here because we're not in a floodplain. Okay, so I want to make sure I understand what you just said. So you're adding fill to make sure that you've got 4 feet of soil above the bedrock.
Yeah, we have 4, but we'll probably be adding another foot or more, if nothing else, to reduce the number of stairs from the first floor down to the patio. Probably at least another foot, maybe 18 inches.
Okay,
which is basically what you would be scraping off the rock anyway. So it'd just be push it in the back and grade it out.
Okay. John, I think I understand that. Does that satisfy that concern?
Yes, we just, hi, Tony.
Hi, John.
Hi. We're just gonna need, the test logs for the soil in the rear yard.
Yep, not a
Showing-
problem.
And that should be included in the SWIP document.
Yep,
It just
Okay.
confused me because I know I had spoken with you about it, and I believe the plan specifies that you had the 3 to 4 feet. But when I went into the SWIP, there was a section that talked about bringing fill in, and I thought they contradicted one another. So maybe we could
Right.
just clear that up.
Okay, paragraph 20, invert and inlet and outlet invert elevations on the plans. And there are several things that are just should be marked on the plans. If if there's difficulty with specifying any of these, or if they're not applicable the way we think they are, just let me know. If you can just put them on the plans.
yeah, no, it's
we
not,
think-
actually, all those numbers are figured out already there in the HydroCAD. You have to give inverts when you do a HydroCAD study. So I just take them, I'll just have to take them out of the document and find a place to fit them on the plan, pretty much. That's the
Yeah.
hard part.
It would,
And-
it would be very helpful to have a detail, Tony, on the plan. Maybe a
Mhm.
detail of the storage pipes with the outlet control. So we
Right,
understand
Yep.
exactly what the outlet controllers consist of and the inverts of
Okay.
it. I think
Not a
that'll
problem.
really help clear it up.
Okay, and so, some of the elements of the system, the pipe sizes, for example, and slopes, reflected in paragraph 21 also are not currently specified on the plans.
right.
I know a lot of these things are simply put it on the plans, but in a village where 32 square miles of Westchester County drains right into our river and we have serious flooding problems. If we didn't touch all the bases on SWIP, we would not be doing the job that our neighbors put us here to do.
Oh, I agree. Not a problem. Though like I said, I have all the numbers. It's just a matter of passing them along.
Good. And same thing about the offsite drain improvement. I think we understand what you're going to do, but it's not reflected. And in 24, paragraph 24, showing the connection. The one
There's-
thing that
If I could just interrupt, there was one other issue, and I didn't clarify it on my comments. I did ask for a detail of the bay filter,
Right.
so we can understand exactly how the bypass is gonna work. But one
Okay.
item I didn't state in my memo, the bay filter has to be before the storage units. It can't be after the storage units. If it's after the storage units, then we're treating all the water when we really want to treat the first flush water, the initial water that comes off. So the only
Okay.
way we can assure that we treat the initial water is by having the water go through the bay filter first, then into the storage unit.
Okay, so what would go through that then is the line from the trench drain and then the lines that are collected for the roof drains from the house. And they
Correctly.
would go into the bay filter. Okay,
Yes, and then whatever the bay filter's size to handle the water quality, and then everything above that will just bypass around it and directly into the storage units.
okay,
The one thing that I think I actually wanted to understand what you're doing instead of just ask you to document it on the plans. Paragraph 22 talks about of Mr. Keller's memo, talks about the permeable patio and the discharge design. I don't think I understand whether that is simply going to be pervious and infiltrate into the substrata under the patio, or if it's going to discharge through something.
yeah, no, what happens is when you put those patios together, you leave a gap. Let's say you're doing,
It's what makes it
pick-
pervious,
pick
right?
say you're doing brick or whatever you're doing. You leave a gap between the pieces of brick, and underneath, you're gonna have, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like 16, 18, 20 inches of stone. And so the water goes right through the patio and down into the stone, and then that percolates into the soil. So there's no, you don't have to collect it. It just goes back to nature, right down into the ground.
Okay, John, do we need to know more about what's under the stone for infiltration or,
Yes, we just, Tony had done a deep hole there, but there was no information on a percolation test.
Yeah, I have to get it back up. I've got it somewhere in my notes. I know
Okay.
it perks decently. So there shouldn't be a problem there.
No, you have plenty of stone to store it. We just have to make
Yes.
sure that it does perk.
Yep.
That's all.
Yeah, the stone is designed to capture the 100-year storm, and then you leave it to perk into the ground however long it takes.
Correct.
okay, I mean, substantively, I think I understand what you're doing. And so we've tried to be as straightforward with what we want to see in terms of further information. It sounds like you've got it all. You just have to present it. Two things I want to outline also in terms of outstanding permits. Typically, we vote once all the other permits that could change the plan are done, right? You still need water and sewer and permit for the work in the right of way.
Right.
We like to see those done. Now, it's not because I think that they're going to require you to make major changes, but you can certainly imagine circumstances where a permit somebody thought would issue does issue, but with limitations, or doesn't, and you have to change things, right? You can,
Right.
not this project, but you can imagine, and sometimes I explain this so that the folks at home who are following it can understand our thinking, or that other applicants can't. So forgive me if I'm giving you more information than you need. You could certainly see if somebody, for example, couldn't get a gas hookup permit and would need to do like geothermal heat or something, but would have to do that in wetland buffer. Well, that would require them to do things that caused us to maybe need more documentation or alterations to the design. So we try not to vote on things with permits outstanding. You're going to do a few more things to document your stormwater management. It's a lot easier for us to vote on it too if we've got the water, the sewer, the right-of-way permit, that we can say, okay, we know everything you're doing, nothing's going to change, and then could vote consistency.
Okay, I did, just so you know, I did meet with the highway superintendent, and we walked the whole line down to the existing catch basin, which actually, I'm basically following the same, more or less, the same direction that was done with the original subdivision approval. I'm going with a smaller pipe, and I'm trying to keep it out of the road, because digging up that road would be a nightmare. It's tight as it is. And so I'm trying to keep everything in the shoulder. So we're going with, he said he'd like to see a minimum 6-inch pipe. I said, it's fine by me, that's fine. So that's what we would propose to put in the shoulder to bring the water, once it leaves the pipes and whatnot on site, and goes down to the existing catch basin. That's
Okay.
about 100 and, from where I hit the shoulder, it's about 145 feet down the road. It's got to go around a bend, and then it catches up with one of the catch basins downstream.
All right, I've covered the issues that I knew I needed to cover. I'm going to open up to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Sellier.
I have a cold and have lost my voice,
Okay.
but I enjoyed listening.
Okay.
I
Commissioner.
did see a number of items, if I'm reading this correctly, of the updated July 14 memo that didn't seem to have been addressed, but maybe you've covered the material.
We just received that memo, so the plans that you have did not reflect that memo. They reflected the memo
Separate.
previous to that.
Okay,
Okay, that's why there's some things say comment addressed and some, I guess, in boldface meant
Hmm.
we didn't address that sufficiently, or it might be a new comment. I'm not exactly sure.
got it. Okay, so it sounds like there's going to be a next time, so.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, com- Yep. Thank you. Commissioner Lusk,
I'm good.
Commissioner Tobias.
I have no comment.
Okay, so we've been fairly focused from the first time we met with you through this time. We're really down to specific items that we want documented so that we are complete. Most of them pertain to stormwater management. We'll expect to see you back when you've got the rest of these items documented, and hopefully when you've got your water sewer right-of-way permits done. And at that time, speaking for my own vote, I think at that time I will probably have the record that I need to vote on consistency. Hopefully we can dispatch this the next time we see you.
Okay, well, there's one thing I did want to bring up, and John is doing his due diligence. There's a thing in there about sight distance. And all I can say is we have the driveway exactly where it was when the subdivision was approved. Now, right or wrong, that, the one thing I wanted to say, we didn't move it. As a matter of fact, you'd be crazy to move the driveway. First of all, there's an existing driveway cut in already. And number two, if you try to slide the driveway, say if you're standing in the street looking at the lot, if you tried to slide the driveway to the right, you're going downhill, which makes the driveway steeper. And then once you go about 10 feet, now you're running into a rock face. That's a good 10 to 12 feet high in some places. So the driveway kind of has to go where it is, and I believe it was approved in that position. The only thing that we did to make it better was if you look at the original subdivision approval, in my opinion, unless you made about 5 or 6 K turns at the top, you were going to have to back out of that driveway onto which to me is a suicide mission, backing out onto that street. So I put a turnaround area up at the top so that at least you're always pulling nose first to the street. If you want to back out, then, that could knock yourself out. But I made a provision to where you could, back out of the garage into this turnaround and then pull straight down. One of the problems with trying to, and I understand what John's point, because I used to have to look at that stuff myself a long time ago. In order to get the 100 feet or so of sight distance, which I have about 50, and all I'm doing is I'm cleaning everything in front of the lot. There is a cluster of trees that the highway superintendent and I noticed right at the corner of the driveway and the street, where, we think if we take that out, that will dramatically increase the sight distance. But I'm trying not to, you have like I said, a rock face that goes literally straight up. And I did a very quick and very dirty guesstimate of the amount. You're looking at somewhere between 150 and 120 to 25 cubic yards of rock that you would have to, and the only way we could do it is chip it. If you tried to throw a, blasting mat over it and shoot it, you'd close the road for days. So the only way to get this stuff out of there would be to chip it out. And, I can't speak for what that would cost. I just know from what I've heard from the guys at Westchester, when they rent a machine to chip the stone, it's $5,000 a day. And so, you know, you're looking at a pretty expensive thing to try to accommodate that one thing. I mean, we'll do the best we can, and maybe I got to talk to John about this one. But if there's any way we could reduce that number, I would appreciate it. But I'm going to try to address everything in the comments. But
if
that's
we-
one thing I would like you guys to really think about. There's
If-
going to be a tremendous expense, which apparently when the subdivision was approved, I don't think it was addressed, because I have a copy of the subdivision plans that were done. And I don't see anything in there about clearing an area for site distance. Now, it may have been missed previously, and that doesn't make it right. I'm just saying, I was looking for that specifically to see what they had. If there was something addressed in there, and I couldn't find anything. So I don't know if it just, they took a look at the rock and said, do the best you can, or
Yeah,
what. But
I noticed that also, Tony. It doesn't appear that that it was really focused on when the subdivision was approved.
right,
But I truly feel it's probably the most serious issue with this site. Because, you know, and I went out there last Sunday night and I walked it myself again, and I looked at the sight lines when cars were coming up. I actually drove it to see how fast I was going when I got to that point. And we have to do something there, or somebody's gonna get hurt.
you know,
I'd be glad to meet you out there with the highway super, because it's gonna be the highway superintendent's final decision. He's gonna issue the curb cut.
uh-huh,
Okay, so all I can do is, you know, provide my opinion to him.
Right.
But, you know, I thought you could possibly shift the last 30 feet of that driveway, just swing it a bit into some rock, but get the driveway a little closer to the corner where the curve is. And I think your sight lines improve so that you could see the whole route up and down. And it may take a couple of days of a chipper, but I would rather see your client spend $10,000 on chip and rock than have somebody coming out of his driveway and have an accident. I had that
I
much of a
think that
concern
maybe
because
we
the
could
sight
meet out
line
there.
it's just so limited. It really is.
right. Yeah, it's terrible. Maybe if we could meet out there, you and I could kind of pick a spot and say, let's,
Absolutely. And maybe
Yeah.
we can have the highway superintendent with us so that we all
yeah,
agree.
and he's a great guy. He was
Yep.
very willing to help us. He's a
Okay,
very
then
nice guy.
let's schedule that. And
Okay,
come to an
Strictly-
agreement on what we should do.
okay,
You know, strictly speaking, your curb cut permit, that's between you and getting your curb cut permit. But
Right.
you also do need it in order to get your project done, so.
correct.
All right, we've heard from all the commissioners. At some point, we need a public session on this. We might as well do it now. It's on the agenda, and any member of the public who wants to comment on this project has had plenty of notice. Even though we're coming back on this one, there's no time like the present. So unless anybody objects, I'm going to open the public comment session in case we have anyone. No objection. Brittany, let's open the floor to any members of the public who want to comment on this project.
I don't have any hands at the moment.
Give them a minute just in case.
Hi, everyone. This is Jarrett. I just wanted to remind you guys with the driveway, thank you again for looking at this site plan. This driveway has existed on the lot for a couple decades now, and it has been used as a driveway. So I definitely understand your concerns about the site distance, trying to be up to 100 feet, given the speed limit around the area being about 20 to 25 miles per hour, depending on what road you go down. But that specific part of Osborne, the speed limit is 15 miles per hour. So in the setting of the existing speed limit at that portion of Osborne being 15 miles per hour, based on at least what I'm reading online, based on the National Highway database and everything, that should be less than 100 feet. And also given the fact that this driveway has existed as it is now for multiple decades and has been used by the people who own 122 Osborne without any issue. It's just I have concern about, the cause, and I know you guys don't frankly care about the cause, you just care about the safety and the regulation about moving the driveway. But why move the driveway if it's already existing? I know that John and Tony, you guys are going to be talking about that, but I just want to highlight that fact that this driveway has existed as it is already now for multiple decades.
And again, just mostly so the applicant, but also the public are clear. We don't rule on sightlines. That's not something that's within our policy, so it's outside our lane. The project needs the curb cut, but that's not something we adjudicate. So we've got since our consulting engineer also covers those issues for those purposes, and he's here, we've sort of had that discussion, but that's not something that the commission decides. That's just something that happens to be convenient to discuss at the same time. Okay, so we've invited members of the public who want to comment on the project. No one has taken the opportunity to do so, and I'm going to move to close the public session. That's actually a motion. I'm going to make a motion to close the public session. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I saw Commissioner Sellier's hand. We have unanimously closed the public session. We're done with this applicant for the evening. Mr. Pizzari, I will see you the next time when you can come back with the information we've talked about, and hopefully we'll be seeing you for the last time at that point. Thank
Okay,
you, folks.
okay, good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to call our administrative item, and I think just as housekeeping, this is about the dog park at Harbor Island Park. We first of all, just in sort of the press of business, this went on as an administrative item, and nobody picked up on it to change it, but I probably should have advised the village that this should go on as an applicant. And to be fair to the village, there's a CAF filled out and it's written like an application. We just put it on our agenda as an administrative item, but it really is an application. Do we have anybody here from the village to answer substantive questions?
No, we don't have anyone.
Okay.
from the Department.
All right. Well, what I can do then is we can roll through the commissioners and see what concerns we have, and we may, and I do have some, so we may have to have this one come back. We try to move as expeditiously as we're able for every applicant, but I think we try especially hard to move expeditiously when the village is our applicant, often because it's harbor stuff and often because it's time sensitive. And we'll try to move this one as quickly as we can too. The explanatory materials indicate the distance from the water in the West Basin is 300 feet. I didn't understand whether that was from the entrance point or the nearest distance or something else. We did not have a plan to look at that really explained that. We've got a very broad scale computer drawing. I understand where it is in relation to Harbor Island Park and the other buildings, but beyond that, it didn't really provide us a lot of information. Didn't give us anything about the foot traffic flow of where the fences would be, where the impervious concrete area would be, et cetera. Didn't provide anything in terms of planning for soil stockpiling method of work, though I understand that'll be pretty modest given the scope of the thing. Obviously, this is a small, modest project, and I don't want to treat it as though it's you know, a bigger, more intensive project than it is. It would have been helpful to have a little more detail. And it certainly would have been helpful to have somebody that we could talk to, and hopefully we can remedy that. In terms of the view shed policy 25, and we've talked about this in several different contexts with a few different applicants over the past few years. Nothing in policy 25 makes us the style council. It's not a matter of aesthetic judgment. It's a matter of preservation of aesthetic resources. So I don't understand policy 25, for example, to give us, put us in a position of choosing whether a picket fence or a corral fence or a metal fence is more aesthetically pleasing. What policy 25 does do, and specifically for things that are visible from Harbor Island Park, as specified in the LWRP, what it does do is puts us in a position of determining whether something visible from Harbor Island Park would interfere with visual resources that our neighbors count on. And that either means that it's different in size or scale or position such that it blocks views, and then we have to decide how much it's taking away, or if it's of such a character that it's going to draw the eye and change what people are looking at. So that doesn't mean we get to pick the kind of fence. It means that we get to make sure that that fencing and other, even if they're low lying, other structures that get built that are in or visible from Harbor Island Park are consistent with the general look and aren't going to change the overall picture that people are looking at. I get a sense from the narrative that that's the case. The narrative in the application specifies that there are sports fields there, various kinds of barriers, and that other areas of Harbor Island Park are fenced off in various ways, which is certainly true. It sort of hints without quite saying that the style of fence is going to be the same. If the size and scale and general character of the fences are the same as what we see in other parts of Harbor Island, speaking for myself, that probably satisfies policy 25 and as far as we need to inquire, but it's not as clear as I would like it to be on the narrative, and we don't have any plan where we could look at a rendering or a plan and say, oh yeah, I can see what it is. It looks like what we would expect from the park. I have, because it is Harbor Island Park low-lying near the sound, it's not obvious to me there would be any net fill, but that is obviously a serious concern that we've raised around policy 11 in the past. And it's essentially a prophylactic per se rule. There's no plan and therefore no cut fill, because we have been so exacting with other applicants on the net fill issue. We need, in order to be consistent, just to touch that base. It's, again, not obvious to me at all that there would be any net fill. I don't see this particular problem, but I do feel like we have to make the record on that issue. Also, I think we want to make the record because any water that covers that grass, and it does happen from time to time, would is not all that far from the West Basin. We would probably want to talk about any natural waste material produced in a dog park. Are we going to have a lot of feces there? And if so, what does that mean environmentally for the sound? Is it any different in its overall impact? Is it mostly going to be picked up? Is it going to be policed in any way? And if not, is the runoff and effluent going to have any different impact from, for example, the naturally occurring goose feces and other things that already wash into the West Basin? That's an issue on which I feel like I should have a record before we cast a consistency vote. And finally, for the multiple historic sites that are not very far, we don't have any distances. Again, the the plan was so limited that we don't have any distances to any of them. It would be helpful to know, it was not obvious to me from the minimal mapping provided, that this is very close to anything except for the wastewater treatment plant. Nothing indicates to me that there's a serious issue or that it would cause any problems with the historic sites, but it would be nice to know distances, and right now we don't have that. I think we don't, without any significant information, we don't have enough to make it make sense to do this for public comment. I'm going to open this up to other folks, then I have one procedural question. Randy?
What is the need for the concrete entrance foyer? I'm trying to envision why if you just throw a fence up in a relatively small area, I'm just trying to figure out what's that about.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me. I take it that this is something the trustees have decided to go forward with, and
It was referred to us by a trustee vote.
right. I have some experience from Pelham Manor in a dog park that I still take my dog to a lot. And one of the things about a dog owners, and that's, I think, a 7 or 8 acre park next to the New York Athletic. Well, it's pretty big, and this is obviously very small, that people are the cleanup of the dogs is self-policing, because people realize it's a privilege, and if it's abused, it will be taken away. And people, I would like to see, for example, I don't know if anyone's been up to Rockefeller State Park, where at the entrance to the trails, they do have bags that are available just in case someone forgets. I don't, and this thing seems to be very small. I mean, having walked around here, I've always thought the site at Taylor Lane is remarkably similar in history to the area in Shore Park in Pelham Manor. I don't know if you've ever been down there, but it's quite spectacular. But it did have a history of being a waste site, and it was remediated. But I guess this is not necessarily permanent. I assume the fencing is going to be not particularly expensive. I'm wondering what the purpose of what you need a concrete entrance for. But generally,
I have a guess, and my
Yeah.
guess is that wherever you put the entrance, people all walk in the same direction on the same line, and then stop to do things like adjust leashes and whatever. And that if you don't have some kind of a hardened surface, that it just scrubs it down to bare dirt.
Maybe I'm confused about something. Is the idea here that inside the fence, dogs will be allowed to be off leash?
Yeah, I think so. If
Yeah.
everybody, walks in and stops and takes the leash off, then, they're all stopping at the same place. I suspect that the concrete, though it'd be nice if we had somebody to explain it. I suspect the purpose of the concrete is that high traffic area right at the entrance would get worn down to bare dirt very quickly and would just become a mud hole.
Maybe. There's, I don't know if anyone's been to Ward Acres, which is another dog park, and to deal with that issue, there are kind of 2 gates. So you walk through a gate, close the door, so the dog can't get out. But anyway, yeah, I'm sure 625 square feet isn't that big a deal, but whatever. Okay.
Commissioner Tobias.
Yes, I just found it very limited on the information with regards to where it's located, just because of the fact of the map showing it right next to the waste treatment plant, but it's 300 feet from the West Basin. I don't know. I'm having a hard time getting clarity on that. And I think that they did say that there was going to be some stormwater discharge, but there's like we need a lot of clarity with regards to the fecal matter from the pets and how they're going to dispose it. And my other comment was the details regarding the smell, I guess, coming from fecal matter to neighbors and how they are planning to address that as well. I think that everything else I have has been stated already, but I think just more clarity is really needed.
Yeah, and by the way, one thing that you have to have, particularly in something this small, would be, I think, coordination with the sanitation department. The trash can, it should be arranged that it's emptied every day to address what the issue you just raised. So there's once a week would not be a great idea.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I feel like the park attendees or ball players are going to desire that there's a proper disposal method in place so that while they're watching games, they're not smelling the fecal matter.
And Commissioner Lusk.
Stop it, dear. I'll wait on that.
Where's
That
your
was
dog
my
weighing
dog
in?
commenting.
What's your dog's opinion?
Very negative. She doesn't play well with others.
All right, so historically, we have usually skipped the August meeting, often because it's difficult because people want to travel and we don't seem to have a lot of applicants. There are at least this and possibly one other open applicant that may want us to meet. Do we have availability? I can make myself available. Brittany, can you give me the date of the third Wednesday in August?
Yep. 1 second. The 17th.
I could do 8/17. Could we get a quorum for that date?
I could do it. I can't, if we do a work session, I can't make the work session, but I can do the 17th.
Understood. Okay, so I think we can get all four. Move to set a regular August meeting for August 17. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so if the staff could communicate to the village the issues that we've raised, and that we without without any negative sentiment towards the project as a whole, it's just not a very complete presentation. It would really be useful to us to have a plan and somebody to address some of these issues, feces runoff, need for the concrete, general character of the fencing. That's the things that we've raised tonight. We are, in order to expedite this as much as we can, we are willing to hold an August meeting, even though we don't usually do that. And we have set one for that purpose on our characteristic third Wednesday of the month, so that we can turn to this matter as quickly as we can. With that, the only other item that we have on, we're waiting for. I've referred something to our council to see if it properly comes before us. It would be another applicant item, but I have not received an answer on that. The only other thing we have outstanding is that we have 2 sets of minutes. I do like to take some time to look at those and read them before we vote to adopt them, and I have had the time to do that for these two sets. Does anybody let me know if you need more time with them? But the November 23 and December 15 minutes, I've reviewed and I'm ready to vote them.
Me as well.
They seem
It's
fine to
fine.
me.
Okay, move to adopt the November 23 minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And move to adopt the December 15 minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Both
Aye,
sets,
sorry.
both sets of minutes adopted. And motion to adjourn. Second?
Second,
Can I ask one question? Sorry. Did you get the email I sent you regarding 1044 South Cove?
Oh, well, maybe I do have an answer on that before we before we close out the motion to adjourn. Let's you know what? This shouldn't be on an open agenda. This is advice of counsel. So let's finish this up and then I'll take that offline. So we had a motion to adjourn. I heard a second. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Okay. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much for your time.
Here's, whoops.